everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, I think everybody's going to be initially muted, and then at some point we're going to ask for a few responses, and we're going to be asking questions, and we can unmute people if we see them raising their hands. So feel free to let us know. We're going to try to keep track of that, Ellen and I. But we are just going to start in a few seconds. We want to just let a few more people come in, and we want to thank you for joining us today for our webinar, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to collaborate with each other to help bring our anxiety down as we are all in uncharted territory. All right. Okay, so let's get started. So Ellen and I want to welcome all of you to this seminar, and we are hoping that by the end of our time together, you can really leave feeling a little bit better with more sense of calm, because you have had the opportunity just to learn about some of the strategies to make sure that you remain resilient during this time. And also because we are all experiencing significant changes about the way that we go about our normal day, and we are all trying to adjust to a situation that is new and brings a lot of fear, stress, and anxiety. So this is new for all of us, and we are going to try to attempt to be doing all the things that we have to do at home with work, and I would say to strive for good enough and to live day by day feeling very grounded in what we have available to us right now without going too much into the future. So a little bit about who we are. My name is Dr. Claudia Salazar. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I am the owner and founder of the Center for Effective Psychological Services. And we are a psychotherapy group practice in Washington, D.C. And I will let Ellen unmute herself and introduce herself. I have to unmute you? Okay, there you go. There you go.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Ellen McSweeney. I am a social worker working at CEPS with Claudia. And I just want to say we're really, really happy to have the opportunity to be with you all today. We know that this is a really difficult and unprecedented time for all of us. And I see that there's almost 50 of us here together today, which is wonderful. So yeah, and I just want to let you know some of the things that I like to specialize in are things like using mindfulness and using our physical body to help with mental health. So I'll be offering some of that later, but mostly just want to say a very warm welcome. And let us know in the chat if you're having any technical troubles while Dr. Salazar is presenting. I can try to help you. And yeah, we're looking forward to being with you. Thank you. And okay.
All right, sounds good. Okay, and then now I can see the presentation. Okay, so now let's go to the the next one.
It won't let me.
Okay, so what we're going to do today is that the first part, we're going to just review a few of these concepts of fear, stress, and anxiety. And because we tend to kind of use these concepts in a way that is, you know, interchangeable. So we want to make sure that we kind of have a way to differentiate which one is one, so that we can also tailor some of the different approaches or coping strategies for the fear, for stress, and anxiety. Also, after that, we covered that, we're gonna be able to take some questions, and then Ellen is going to help us also think about different strategies or techniques to increase our mind and body resilience. Then we have some time for also questions and answers, and then Ellen is gonna help us with a grounding meditation towards the end so that we can wrap up the webinar feeling better. And also so that hopefully if this is the first time that you try mindfulness meditation, that you can take this as a tool that you will be able to use in the next coming weeks, and perhaps even teaching some members of your family how to use this to take some moments to really ground yourself in the present moment and to calm your mind, calm your body in moments when you're noticing that your anxiety or your stress or your fear are starting to kind of bubble up. So that's kind of how we're going to be orienting our seminar today. So the first part is understanding our responses to fear, stress, and anxiety. So we are in this together, and the reason, or one of the reasons why we decided to do this webinar was because in the same way that we are facing this pandemic and we know that this coronavirus is something very contagious, we also know that fear and anxiety can be very contagious. And once one person starts to get a little bit anxious or panicky around this situation, it is very likely that we are all going to start sensing and feeling some kind of anxiety as well. And also, you know, being the way that we are right now in these days exposed to the media, is also very anxiety provoking to be all the time kind of like fed with all these images and these very sensationalistic sometimes information that can also increase our anxiety. So in the same way that this fear and anxiety can be very contagious, we are also born to participate in each other's regulation of our central nervous system. And I think this is a concept, maybe, I don't know, Ellen, if you would agree with this, that we want to also drive home today, in the same way that we are all taking action to protecting each other by staying home or working from home with all these losses and these changes that we are experiencing right now, we also can contribute to each other's sense of calm and peace if we learn how to self-regulate. And this applies for you as parents. If you remain regulated, you are going to help your children also to remain regulated and calm. If you are somebody who maybe is working from home and managing a team, if you are able to self-regulate, you are going to be able also to guide your team into a more productive time, because they are also struggling with how to make life, you know, work life and home life balance under very challenging circumstances. So we can participate in each other's regulation if we know how to be able to maintain some sense of calm and balance internally. So the other reason that I thought it was important to talk about this is because during moments of stress, we tend to really rely or revert to automatic habits of coping with anxiety and fear. Some of those habits are very, very old, and we learned them in the past, in our early childhood or during traumatic situations sometimes, and they were successful, let's say, in the past. You know, we kind of like, I put these pictures here because I thought the you know, situation that we are all experiencing of the toilet paper running out in the stores is very telling, in that is what we know to do in these circumstances, and we have the need for control as well. So it is something that we all feel that when there is something that is a national emergency, we all go run for the first things that we think we're gonna need. So this is in part related to that situation, or something symbolic about it. And I also put a picture there of the masks, because it's something that also very organically people felt that that's the thing that we needed to do. And it was only through very, very consistent messaging from the medical authorities that they had let us know that masks really are not protective in this epidemic. It is something that can protect people who are very sick, or people who are already, let's say, sick from infecting other people. It is something that has been reinforced maybe in some countries because of cultural responses, and because we need to respect also that some governments have enforced the use of masks. So some cultures, this is kind of like the way that people take responsibility for each other, and it's something very related to particular cultures. So it is very important to also know that sometimes these kind of habits makes us feel as if we are protected, and maybe gives us a false sense of security. The other piece of this is that some of the automatic habits, it could be sometimes habits of thoughts, right? Like becoming self-critical, or becoming a little bit irritable, It could be habits of, for instance, taking responsibility for things that we are not responsible of. So some people may be struggling as they become infected, maybe with issues of shame and responsibility and a sense of guilt, maybe. So those are all habits of the mind that we need to be particularly aware of if this is something that we tend to default on when we are under in times of stress, basically to gain some sense of control. So I put these three concepts here in terms of fear, stress, and anxiety, because as I mentioned before, we really tend to speak about them in a way as if we are referring to the same thing, and they have some similarities and some differences. So in terms of similarities, the three concepts share the main role, right? Like they are all, let's say, evolutionarily designed to guarantee that we can survive as individuals and as a species. So we are equipped, to say it in some way, with the capacity and our ability to sense fear, to experience stress, and to feel anxiety as a way to deploy resources, physically and psychologically speaking, to adapt to changes or to respond to a particular threat. But so the main role for all of those, they share it, and is physical and psychological survival. And another thing that they share is that they tend to be experienced in our body in a very similar way. So all of those three, in different, let's say, intensity, are this will involve the same systems in our body and our brain. They all will involve the limbic system in our brain. They all will involve our muscles and our skeleton. They will involve our ability to breathe, our heart to be able to pump the blood that we need into our limbs to escape or to fight, depending on the situation. So those are things that they all share. I'll go to the next one. Fear, it is the response and the experience that we have when there is imminent danger, when there is physiological and psychological reaction to real or perceived threat. And it is what helps us to initiate the stress response, going into fight, flight, or freeze. And the fear is something that is usually related to a particular, and we know in some way what is it that we are responding to. And our attention is all dedicated to that particular source of threat. So it's very specific, and it's something that is definitely going to allow us to escape the particular danger. So in this situation, it's very important to really normalize and to acknowledge that the fact that we're feeling a little bit of fear, I mean, it is realistic. There is some harm that is going to come our ways if we don't take steps necessary to prevent the infection, and because it's something that we don't know much about. So there is, let's say justification to experience this fear because there is some sense of threat. But the important piece of this is to be able to keep the fear from escalating to a level of panic related to maybe habits of the mind that may tend to distort a little bit the information that we are getting, or put us in a little bit of a loop where anxiety is going to just be escalating and is going to actually have an impact on our ability to make decisions, or is going to make us feel very paralyzed. So that's also very important to keep in mind. So how can we use fear to our advantage? So when we are scared of something, we really need to know exactly what's happening. So we are going to be able to, or to need to find some information. So in the face of fear, it is very important to learn the facts, to understand that there are particular sources that are going to give us reliable information, and that we have to be very cautious in deciding what are going to be those sources of information that we are going to rely on to make decisions. So learn the facts, make a plan that's going to help us make a plan, and to prepare to put that plan into action. And also to make sure that we don't become too rigid, that as new information may come in, we need to probably be flexible enough to adjust our plans and to incorporate changes depending on what's going on. And to try to keep life very simple in order to reduce stress. So this is not really time to take on too complicated new habits or new things that we want to do, or to try to get into perfectionistic mindset where we're going to try to make sure that the kids have a super structured schedule that they're going to be following to the T, that everybody has something to do, or that we are going to deliver our work to the same standards that we are used to when we are in the office. So I think it is going to hopefully also be a good opportunity to learn to be more flexible and to really be creative. You know, so we sometimes talk about the concept of post-traumatic growth, and I think this can also be an opportunity to get some good things out of this situation. And, you know, I know that it may be a little bit too soon, just as we are starting to go through this very difficult moment to think about maybe positive, but I think it's always also helpful to see how we can reframe some of the experiences that we're going to be having in the next few weeks, to know that, that this is also going to help us build new resources, right? New capacities to deal with adversity as family, as community, and as individuals. So we know that there is a particular source of fear that we're going to be facing, but in the next few weeks, we are also going to be experiencing stress coming from other sources. For instance, the lack of a structure in our day. We are all used to maybe getting up at the same time every day. We know what kind of train we take to go into work. We know exactly what's the first thing that we do. And the kids have tons of structure embedded in their school day. And now we are kind of thrown with all the family, or maybe just by ourselves in our apartment, with no structure at all. And I think that could be one of the things that are more difficult as we go through these next few weeks. And it is important to try to create some structure in our days. It is important to create some rituals. If you are working, for instance, it will be important to make sure that you are more intentional about taking breaks, to kind of be able to maybe walk around. Remember that you don't have to be stuck in your house just yet. So we can still walk around. We can still maybe go to the park, maybe not to interact with neighbors too much, but you can still go there and sit on a bench and just breathe for a few moments, walk your dog, things that, you know, you can be creative or go for a run depending on what your habits of exercise are. But important to know that you need to kind of put some structure in your day. Also, sorry. Something important is to also become aware of the stress that could be experienced due to family dynamics. We have the opportunity to go away from our loved ones, even in the most loving relationships. Sometimes we need a little bit of separation and things to do as apart our, you know, independent lives. So having everybody at home at the same time could bring a stress up, just because of the different interpersonal situations that we may have at home, but also just because individually our stress levels are likely to be a little bit higher. So that could make us feel a little bit more irritable. If we have a tendency maybe to be a bit controlling, we want to kind of make sure that everybody does what we figure is the best for the family, that kids eat healthy, that they don't stay in their rooms all the time, or that our spouses or our loved ones just behave in the ways that we really want them to behave. So you have to kind of become aware of your own tendencies to attempt to control things around you that can bring escalate conflicts at home. We also are going to be dealing with the issue of increasing social isolation that could be particularly difficult for, you know, if you have relatives who are older and they have to kind of be very, very careful, or if they are in nursing homes and you don't have access to them for a lot of our particular clients, they have family members who live abroad, and this can be a particularly challenging time also for them. And people who maybe are single or live by themselves, and they don't have the access to the social support that they normally have during the daily life. So in terms of opportunities of socialization. So perhaps a very important thing that we can all do is to start focus on not in the amount of social access to social support that we have, but how can we really be more intentional, and how we work to really deepen the relationships that we have with our family members or the people that we care the most, right? And to also maybe be mindful of people who may be struggling in their isolation, maybe people who, friends that we know or family members that we know that may suffer from depression or anxiety, that could be really having a hard time right now, and that they not necessarily are going to be willing or able or at a place where they're going to be actively reaching out to connect with others. So, you know, we complain a lot about the different ways in which technology and social media is really driving us apart, but this could be an opportunity to reframe also our relationship with technological advances and social media, to use it for connection instead with those people that we cannot reach that easily. Another source of stress for many people is the financial worries, and this could be one that could actually continue even after we are done with the piece of the pandemic. If we get this under control, this could be a longer lasting source of stress and worry. And as I was mentioning before, the newness of having to do a lot of work from home and balancing the care for young children in particular. So this is to remind us that the stress response is something that is designed to be short-term, that is something that is supposed to kind of have a beginning and an end, and that really when we engage in chronic stress responses, or when we allow the stress to just go on and on, it can lead to fatigue, exhaustion, and it can really have a very negative effect on our health. And this is one of the reasons that we also decided to talk about the psychosocial aspects of this pandemic, is because it is really through our ability to manage this stress, the fear and anxiety, that we can really help our bodies to remain healthy, and to make sure that we are not going to be making ourselves more vulnerable for the coronavirus by putting a lot of stress on ourselves. And anxiety is, the way that I like to think about anxiety is kind of like as an alarm bell. It's a signaling affect that indicates that there is something that wants our attention. So I frequently talk about anxiety as an experience or an affect that we need, that we can actually befriend, even though it feels uncomfortable. It's something that we can really learn to relate to as helpful. We can see, okay, there is this smoke detector, if you want to see it in that way, that is letting us know that there is something that is really wanting to for us to be curious, that is inviting curiosity, that hopefully is inviting curiosity without judgment, that we can really try to see, okay, what's underneath this anxiety. You know, there may be some fears that we have, there may be a particular feeling that is hard to really cope with, or a particular story that I'm telling myself about what's going on in a relationship or in the world that is kind of really producing some sense of discomfort. It is usually a kind of lingering stress reaction that continues after the actual threat has happened. So anxiety can come up, let's say, even after, let's say that, to put a different example, you have had a difficult conversation with somebody that happened yesterday. So the conversation happened yesterday and ended yesterday, but still today, in your mind, you are rehashing this conversation and you are still having feelings about it and having some anxiety and some worry about it. So there is a lingering stress reaction that is not contained to the time where the particular situation happened. And just because we, as human beings, have the ability to recall things that happened in the past, or even to go 10 years into the future to predict how things are going to happen, we tend to kind of be more prone to anxiety. It is a state of unease and worry, and sometimes it's not very clear what the source of it is. So this is kind of what is different between anxiety and fear, and is that fear, we are more certain about what may be causing it, and is really something that is a real threat or perceived threat to our survival. And anxiety is something a little bit that could be a little bit more vague. And when we talk about trying to keep our anxiety and a fear and stress in the optimal level, this is a good graphic that can help us understand this. So there is what we call the window for optimal levels of anxiety, and then we tend to, the smaller the window, then it will be easier for us, for triggers or for things that happen into our life, to put us into a hyperreactivity or hyperreactivity reaction. So the more we can really expand that window, the more we can find ways to really manage our stress, to feel grounded, to breathe, to find strategies that help us to self-regulate, then things that happen to us daily in our lives are going to have less effect and less ability to really produce reactions that can be harmful to our minds and to our bodies. So what are the main challenges in the next coming weeks? We are going to be dealing with a lot of uncertainty. So this is very, very new. There is, the experts still don't know all the answers. And our brains, as sophisticated as they are, they really they're kind of lazy a little bit, and they really like to consume very little energy. Our brains like certainty, predictability, and they like things that make meaning. So then our brains are always going to try to fill the gaps or the blanks with thoughts, right? And with things that are related to past experiences. We are going to be completing the blank spaces with things that really perceptually make sense. So depending on what's available to us, we are going to kind of be filling up those gaps of things that we don't really know yet. So sitting with uncertainty could be one of those very, very difficult things to do, but really we have to make space to say, you know, we don't know, and what we know today is this, and what we can trust that we can, as soon as the information comes in, we are going to trust that we are going to be able to make more sense of it, or we can resort to somebody who can help us understand what's happening. Some important tools that we can have with our minds is that we can definitely make sure that we choose information sources wisely. And this is very important, that we limit the time that we spend watching the news. There is not much you're gonna miss if you don't check every hour. So you can even schedule 2 or 3 times a day that you catch up with the news. And also try to go to the places that you know are going to be less sensationalistic about news. You have to be also aware of cognitive distortions or thinking errors. For instance, that we know that we are going to be taking information that is available to us. And sometimes, let's say, in particular with the coronavirus, we keep hearing about how many people are infected, how many people are dying. And in some way, we are ignoring also information about how many people recover, right? How many people, and we know by what the experts are sharing with us, that it is really most people, as long as you're healthy, will tend to recover from this infection. Also, we know that a smaller amount of people, and I don't know the percentages right now, and I don't want to give wrong data, but I know that there is a smaller percentage of people that will need maybe to go to medical care. Even a smaller portion will have to go into intensive care unit. Maybe a smaller portion will have percentage will have to kind of use a respirator, and this is what we are all actually as communities trying to avoid, is to overload the medical facilities that are going to be needing different breathing machines to help people breathe for the small percentage of people that will need it. So we want to keep that percentage small. Also, our tendency sometimes to minimize or catastrophize. So some of us in the face of crisis, we tend to kind of like get ahead of ourselves and think the worst can happen. And some of us will tend to just dismiss things. So we have to kind of be aware of what is our, I think it's been called in some places, our emergency personality or crisis personality. And to kind of know that we have particular tendencies from past experiences that we are going to have to adjust a little bit, to know that we need to know ourselves and what needs to be corrected. The other challenge is what we talked about, the social distancing or the too much closeness. So this is going to be definitely something important to keep in mind, to be meaningful of our connections. And I already talked a little bit about that in a previous slide. So I think we can, if anybody has a comment, you can put it in the question and answer. In social isolation, I also wanted to keep us mindful that not everyone has a family or significant other. Not everyone has a close-knit circle of friends. That in times of crisis, people dealing with severe anxiety or depression may not be in a place where they can or want to reach out. That it can be difficult to live far away from our families. And to think about how can you really safely reach out to others and stay connected. What can you do to be meaningful to your community in these situations? For those of you who are going to be doing a lot of home-based work, make sure that you incorporate the structure, that you incorporate breaks. We know that our attentional system can only handle a few minutes of focus at a time. So sometimes we really go into it, and there are tasks that require blocks of time, like writing, for instance, is something that really requires that you block a certain amount of hours. But it is important that if that's not the case, that you really schedule maybe 45 minutes and then a break, 45 minutes of work and then a break. Also try to limit maybe notifications that are coming up all the time in the computer. And I think Ellen will talk a little bit about this, but try some of those breaks to kind of have movement, so that you can also be able to wake up the attentional system. Our frontal lobe sometimes needs that we make sure that we have a good posture and that we are physically active so that our attention can improve. Flexibility, go with the flow, accept what is. You know, we cannot change some of the things that we're going to be faced with, and accept also what is possible. We are not going to be doing everything that we have to do right now perfectly, and that is fine. And let go of perfectionism, meaning that we have to attempt to, go for the good enough right now for things. And compassion. And then increasing our mind and body. Yeah, let me just unmute you. How can I do that? Here. How did I unmute you, Ellen? Okay, here. Okay.
Okay, great. So I think now we'll take a little pause for questions, since we've been listening for a while and people may have things they want to ask about before I move on to part 2. So for those who don't know, you can go over to the participants tab inside your Zoom window, and then you can raise your hand. And then if I see that your hand is raised, I should be able to hopefully unmute you, or I think Dr. Salazar can unmute you. So, okay, so I see Rena. Claudia, are you able to unmute Rena so that we can hear from her? Okay, and Rena, you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you.
So did you have something that you wanted to ask?
Well, I'm actually really grateful that you guys put this together because I'm stuck working from home, and I am a licensed clinical social worker like you. But I have 3 children, and they are a bit on the anxious side. And so I wanted to see what kind of tips you guys were. And they're just pretty common sense stuff, but because they're my children, I couldn't think of them. You know what I mean? so,
Yes.
So thank you so much for putting this together. I really, really appreciate it. I think the best thing it's that it's recorded now, and I will have access to it so that I can then speak to them a little bit better. I also work with immigrant families and children. And some of those families, those children are going to be unsupervised for extended periods of time. And so I'm a bit concerned about that. And that's my own anxiety about that. And I know those parents are worried as well. So this is helpful. And I just really appreciate you guys doing that.
Thank you
Well,
so
I'm
much.
glad that you are finding it helpful, and you know, this is as a resource. And I think as we going to in the next few weeks, we're going to have a lot of resources that we can forward and share, because people have really trying to kind of be creative and offering a lot of ideas of what to do with children. So we will be happy to share what we have get into our hands in terms of that. But I think and I totally understand when it comes down to our own kids, it's very hard to also make use of those tools because we are in it. And I think even yesterday I had an experience with my teenager daughter where she kind of came up for some food, and then she was going to go back to her room, and I'm like, don't you think that you are going to be in your room for the next month, because she has 4 weeks off. So she's like, don't yell at me, and I'm like, I'm not yelling, I'm just being very sure that you get it. So that was just the first hour that we started this kind of home-based thing going on. So yeah, definitely we appreciate that. Smaller kids were going to be having different challenges. Some of them will not understand why they have to be restricted. So we have to kind of make sure that we are also very compassionate in terms of like, yeah, this kind of really sucks that you have to stay in and you cannot see your friends right now. You have to go, you cannot go to the playground. So we will be happy to share other things that come into our hands. So we'll probably share it through our Facebook page, most likely. I think that will be kind of like the easier way. So if you want to check it out and just I think we also will share some things as in our newsletter. And hopefully we can all face this as a community.
Thank you, Rena.
It's a wonderful idea. I really appreciate it too. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And I think I see, maybe we can take one more question from Thomas before I start my part.
I don't have any questions. Just comments.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Thomas, go ahead.
Oh, I don't have any questions or comments. Thank you for putting this together. I appreciate it. Like my coworker, Rena.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay, thanks so much. Cool. So I'm just looking in the chat and making sure nobody else on the call would like to speak or follow up. Okay, and then Rena and Thomas, you can also sort of unraise your hand in the participants tab too. Perfect, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so And Claudia, you can go ahead and maybe mute both of those guys again. Yeah, okay, perfect. So I will, I'll go ahead and share my own screen. So we'll try that. And I am going to do part 2, which has to do with increasing our mind-body resilience. And sorry, Rena and Thomas, that you're still on the panelist chat, but it's okay. Now your names will be a little bit more famous. Okay, cool. Okay, there we go. So some of the things that I'm going to be talking about in this part have to do with just really important ways that we can orient to our situation, ways that we can kind of orient to ourselves and the people around us. And I really love this slide from Dr. Salazar. We want to think about our ability to be present, our ability to kind of accept what is happening around us in the here and now and kind of relax maybe a little bit with that acceptance. And then also the importance of compassion, because we're all facing very difficult circumstances in this moment. And so just to take a moment to acknowledge that for yourself, that these circumstances really are very challenging. It can be important, right? 2 weeks ago, we were not in this place. And so it's important to be compassionate for ourselves. So some of the things I'm going to talk about in this part, we're going to talk about using our physical bodies as a resource for staying resilient and as helping us to stay regulated in this unprecedented situation. We're going to talk about using our 5 senses as a resource. I will also offer the practice of rain. This is something that was popularized by Tara Brach, our beloved local meditation teacher here in DC. And connected with rain is that importance of self-compassion. So I'm going to put into practice something that Dr. Salazar was already sharing, which is that it's really important to take breaks. And I'm actually delighted that I didn't realize in the webinar we would not be able to see each other, but this is perfect because this means that we can all feel much less self-conscious, except for me and Claudia. We will happily model. But I actually want to invite everyone to stand up. If you are in, if you are in your home, if you are in a comfortable place and you're comfortable standing, you can stand up, because we're going to talk about how we can kind of ground ourselves with just some really basic movement. So you don't need any fancy clothes. This is not a sort of, yoga studio kind of thing, but just you might begin by just letting your chin gently drop to your chest. And then if you'd like, you can allow your head to just kind of make some soft semicircles. And again, everything that I offer is, of course, completely voluntary and completely optional. So if it doesn't feel right to you right now to participate in the movement, of course, that's totally fine. So you might start by making some small circles if you'd like. You can experiment with some bigger circles. Just noticing maybe the sensations in the back of your neck. And then in your own time, bringing that movement to a close. And if you're interested, you could also experiment with some shoulder circles. You could try moving one shoulder, maybe the other. You're welcome to move one shoulder at a time, or maybe to experiment with moving both. And again, what we're doing here, the reason that I'm offering this is to think about how we can kind of change the channel. We can change the channel from the mental space, which might be very busy, very preoccupied, to something that's a little more tactile and embodied. And that can bring us some relief, right, from all of this mental activity. So we'll do a couple more things. If you'd like, on an inhale, you can kind of raise your arms over your head. And then on an exhale, lowering the arms slowly. So just, we'll do a couple more rounds of those if you'd like to. And just this idea of synchronizing your movement with your breath can be something that can help kind of bring you back to that optimal level of arousal that Dr. Salazar talked about. We're neither hyper aroused nor hypo aroused, but kind of somewhere in that sweet spot in the middle. Good, maybe one more, breathing in. And really letting the exhale be long and slow if that feels good to you. Good. So just taking a moment now, remaining standing if you're comfortable, and just noticing the impact of having done just a few simple stretches. Noticing the impact of that process on your body and on the state of your mind, maybe the state of your emotions. Yeah, and we might try one more. So it's interesting, I like to think about, with some of the people that I work with, we think about doing something with your body as a way of interrupting something that's happening in your mind, right? It's sort of, if we are finding ourselves spiraling into proliferating catastrophic thinking, you might try giving yourself a challenge, which would just be to stand on one foot, right? So you can't see my feet, but I have one foot lifted off the ground. And just tuning into the challenge of balancing and beginning to place your attention on internal sensations that you may be experiencing while doing this. If you're interested in making it more difficult to balance, you could close your eyes. I know for me, that definitely increases the amount of information and sensation. Again, just noticing what it's like to be in your body as you balance on one foot. And then whenever you would like to, bringing that foot back down to the ground. And again, just noticing the impact on your mind and body. And just for fun, we'll go the other way. I don't want to send you back into your chair unbalanced. So if you're interested, you can pick up the other foot. You could experiment with doing something with your hands if you'd like to. It's almost sort of a modified tree pose. You could bring your hands to your chest, or you could raise your hands above your head. And just beginning to notice the sensations that you may be feeling in your legs as you balance. Just feeling what it's like to be in your body. If you want a bigger challenge, you can close your eyes. That always makes me start to sway back and forth. And then when you're ready, bringing both feet to the ground. And again, just taking that moment to feel how you've been affected by moving your body a little bit. Good. Nice. So, this part of the presentation, so you're welcome to sit if you're comfortable. This part of the presentation is really about actually practicing some of the things that may help us get through these difficult times. I'm picturing all of us at our computers for a long time, and then suddenly we can stand up, right? We can kind of go somewhere else with our experience. So another possible exercise that I'm interested in sharing with you is the possibility of grounding with your senses. So I would like to invite all of you right now to find an object in the room that you're in that you could pick up and hold in your hands. So I'm gonna maybe grab this little rock right here. So take a minute, look around, and we're looking for something that has kind of an interesting texture. I've got this rock here. And you're gonna really just hold this object in your hands and just notice the texture. Notice the temperature. Notice the color. then you're going to set that object down and choose one more object to feel. Sometimes I go with some.
Interrupting, maybe while we do exercises to stop the sharing the screen so we can see you in the full screen.
Oh, thank you. That's a great idea. My yoga poses were really tiny all that time. Thank you for the suggestion. The slide is not very interesting. So yeah, I was just holding this rock. And then the other thing I like to do sometimes is I will literally feel the texture of my own clothing, right? So this can be a moment when if you're feeling kind of really lost in thought, you can really just use the texture of your own clothing, even sometimes literally my own hair. I will literally feel it, right? Or I'll feel it, you know, what my pants are like versus my shirt. Just noticing these different textures. So that would be a way of orienting to touch. Another thing to do would be to look around the room right now and find 5 objects that are green. And as you find these objects, really letting your eyes take in the color. Noticing what happens in your body as you really check out your surroundings. Yeah, I know for me, at some point when I saw the second green object, I felt myself relax a little bit because it was like I was really in the room. So we can orient to touch, we can orient to sight, and we can orient to sound. So, you know, you might take a moment right now and just notice what you can hear. And these are all kind of pathways into presence. Okay, good. So we're getting fairly close to when we were going to stop and do a little bit more Q&A. So I'll just share, one more practice, and then I'm interested in also sharing some resources with all of you. So I'll do a little screen share here for another moment about the practice of rain. And so I'm recommending this practice for times that you may experience emotions that are kind of overwhelming. And you can see the acronym here briefly. So RAIN stands for R is recognize. So we'll kind of walk through this together. I want to invite you right now to perhaps close your eyes and become aware of any emotion or difficult sensation that's currently part of your experience. Just taking a moment to really just notice a particular emotion or feeling that is predominant for you right now. And as you name this emotion for yourself, you're doing the R of RAIN, which is to recognize. And so the A in RAIN stands for allow or accept. And so this doesn't mean that we like the feeling. It doesn't mean that we want it to keep going, but it just means that we're kind of making some space. So if you can identify, maybe the feeling you may be experiencing is fatigue, some anxiety, maybe irritation. Could be happiness also, right? So whatever the emotion is that we're experiencing, we allow it to be here. And we kind of accept it and we make space for it. So just noticing what it's like to kind of make space for what you're feeling. And the I of RAIN stands for investigate. Investigate means we investigate this feeling at a bodily level. So whatever this emotion is that you've identified, what does it feel like in your body? Just taking a moment to locate this emotion in the body. Is there any tightness, heat or coldness, tingling, aching? And then finally, the N of RAIN stands for nurture. And so the key question here with nurture is, how does this feeling need me to be with it? What does this feeling need from me that would feel nurturing, that would feel compassionate? Almost as if we could give ourselves whatever it is that we are needing in the context of this feeling. So I offer that particular practice of rain because I know for me, I have experienced a wide array of feelings over the past several days as things have grown more serious and as my own, fear and worry has increased. I have experienced a lot of different emotions. So the rain practice is understood to be really nice for when kind of strong emotions overtake us. And then the last thing I'll share with you, and maybe we can send these out as resources later on, I assembled some of my favorite online resources for mind-body practice. So I'm not sure, are you all able to, Claudia, are you all able to click these links and see them, or they would not currently show up as hyperlinks? Okay, they would not show up as hyperlinks. So I will make a pledge that I think we have contact information for people who registered for this webinar, so we can send these out to you. There's a woman named Jill Miller who does wonderful work with self-massage and helping you to kind of use your own vagus nerve for good rather than evil. And then some of my favorite apps and video practices. So I'm making a pledge to send these out to you later on because I'm realizing it may not be possible for you to have them right now. Okay, Claudia, shall we move now to another round of questions? I know my part is pretty much done. Okay, good.
Yes, if you have questions or comments, or this is a great opportunity to do more of the imparting information. So let us know if you have anything you want to add or contribute, or maybe even some resources that you have found yourself to be helpful during this time, or particular concerns that you have, so we can unmute people.
Yeah, so feel free to raise your hand again, and then we can look and see if anyone would like to share. Okay, Claudia, you see Marilyn?
Yes, allowed to talk. There you go. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Marilyn.
Unmuting myself.
Perfect.
Yep, yeah. You did it.
So one of the things that I really like to do when I'm in a time of stress and things sort of feeling like they're falling apart is to do some simple artwork. And I don't consider myself an artist, so anyone can do this. And particularly to use the mandala form, to use a circle. Draw a circle on a piece of paper and then create within the circle. You can put your feelings, you can put words, but the circle is a beautiful symbol for containment of so many things, and that can be really helpful. And sometimes when I'm if I really need to do a series, I might do a series kind of quickly and see how they evolve, so that perhaps by the time I get through that process, I can look at my process in those mandalas. So I highly recommend that type of art.
What a wonderful idea. I love that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that, Marilyn. Ela, I think I unmuted you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's been incredible and I think very valuable for us as practitioners and many who are also listening who are lay people. And so I really appreciate it. What I was thinking of was music. I have asked my clients to put together a relaxing playlist, and then a happy playlist. So they create either themselves or with their families music that settles them down. And then another playlist of music that uplifts and perhaps helps them to move and feel energized. So I truly believe in the power of sound and music. So it's been helpful for myself in my own practice, but it's another idea, another technique.
Thank you, Ila. That's perfect. That is really wonderful to remember that the music and also movement, right, can help our emotions really move through, right? So it's important that those who have never tried it, give it a try. But also a lot of people may enjoy dancing, and it is for a form of maintaining our bodies also active. Helps really move feelings through, right? Like we have to remember that feelings are like waves, and they want to come in and they want to leave. And sometimes through a very good music playlist, you can help them really move through. It could be a playlist for fear, it could be a playlist for anger, it could be a playlist for love and joy. And I think I left this out in the presentation, but I think it's very important that we also make space for pleasure and joy during this time. So it is, something that we sometimes really don't put a lot of attention, but our opportunities to experience gratifying emotions sometimes we have to be intentional about it, because our brain tends to kind of have a negative bias towards solving problems or detecting something that is not working. And we have to really be intentional if we want to also take note of the positive things, including gratitude, right? That could be a very important piece of this. Katie has a question here. It says, can you speak more on dealing with others' reactions and attempt of controlling people, especially living with roommates or family members in the home? How do we deal with polarized or opposite reactions to the current events? And in extension of the above, how do we create a supportive home life without over-regulating others?
Yeah, the thing that just emerges for me from this, Katie, and you're welcome to, type more or speak more to talk about the question, is it is really remarkable how different folks' responses are. I know in some of the communities and organizations that I'm part of, some people were way in front of the curve, really trying to sound the alarm and shut things down quite early. Other people felt quite skeptical that anything should be closed until really recently. So there's just kind of that speed, those differences in the speed of processing and the kinds of, just the kinds of defenses or coping strategies that everyone is bringing. So I think it can be very difficult, especially if two really different responses meet each other. So I'm just wanting to validate the fact that I have seen such diversity in how people are responding and kind of triggering each other, right? In fact, my partner's coworker, I think someone just said, you're panicking, so that feeling of things being contagious. So I just want to validate that. Claudia, is there anything that
I was going to say something that I remember from maybe Oprah speaking about trauma-informed work places and trauma-informed families and trauma-informed everything, right? Is that something to remember is when somebody's acting in a way that could seem a little bit irritating, what we see in, for the most part, is an attempt from that person to regulate themselves. It makes sense, whatever they're doing makes sense internally, and sometimes to hold that concept in mind can help us to have a little bit of compassion for them and for ourselves, and to kind of understand that what they are doing is an attempt to handle things in the best way they can in the moment, and to maybe just give a little bit of space and to wait it out. and also that the more polarized we get into trying to make somebody think in the same way that we think or to act, the more polarized they will likely get also on the other side. You know, I would recommend, if things start to get a little bit difficult with people that you live with, there is a great resource. It's a book that is called Nonviolent Communication. And I always think that the title of that book is a little bit unfortunate because we may feel like, oh, I'm never violent in the way I speak to others, but it's more about how to really be empathetic and to connect with each other in a way that allows us to collaborate instead of becoming more kind of conflictual in our relationship. So Nonviolent Communication, they also have a great website with resources that helps us also negotiate our needs in the context of relationships, how to make requests instead of demands, and how to bring down defenses so that we can be heard. So I think that those are also good things to do. I think I had seen somebody, I think Meg had her, do you still want to say something, Meg?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I typed my question out, but my question is like when you, like, it's about cognitive distortion. So when you try to stop catastrophizing and reframe those thoughts, but you see in the media that these bad things are actually happening, how do you reframe those thoughts and believe the new thoughts when you have evidence that these terrible things are actually happening and that you could be affected?
So what I'm thinking is that you have to kind of be very concrete in terms of, let me just kind of mute you here. Concrete in that, for instance, let's say that you see that people who are older, in their older range of age are really at risk. And then you can make sure that you know the percentage, you know, kind of, you know, the facts. And also once you have that information to help you prepare or plan if you are, let's say, within that age range, you kind of take different precautions. So any of these kind of things that are based in reality help us to plan and prepare. But other than that, if you start to overthink about it and to ruminate, that becomes something that you are kind of doing that is perpetuating suffering. So yes, we have, I think Tara Brach really talk about this kind of like as the second arrow, something that comes to hurt us, right? So one thing that in this case is hurting us is this reality. You know, we have some reality-based fears, and that is something that we need to take seriously. We don't have to exaggerate to the point of panic. We cannot minimize and dismiss, but we take it seriously with plan, and what is in our control, then we take measures, right? We take action. Some things are not in our control, and we have to really practice letting go. But the part that sometimes can impose suffering is, for instance, the fact that I already know this, I already plan, I already prepare, I already control what I had to control, and then I just keep ruminating about it. So it would be more about not the catastrophic thinking, although to some regards, but more about stopping the rumination and trying to interrupt it with distraction. Also a lot of kindness, you know, because sometimes when we find our minds doing this as in a cycle, we can become a little bit frustrated with ourselves. So an invitation is to always do all of this with a tremendous amount of compassion and kindness. Use distraction, or do the movement, or some of the different ways that you can use your body to interrupt the busyness in the mind, but always kind of saying something kind like, oh, mind is busy mind. And then that's a cue for you to switch into another channel. So that's kind of what I would offer. I don't know if our fellow therapist or Ellen have something else that can also be helpful. Any other questions? I think we have maybe a couple minutes for more questions, and then we should probably allow Ellen, who's also, I think we forgot to mention that Ellen, oh, wait, Ellen is muted. Hold on. Sorry. Hi, Ellen.
It's really funny because I can mute myself, but I cannot unmute myself. So there's some kind of metaphor there. But anyway, go ahead, what you were going to say.
No, I was going to say that we forgot to mention in your introduction that you also are a yoga therapist, and you did a training in trauma-informed yoga. And so some of the things that you were offering to us are also,
Yes.
you know, come from that background that you have.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah. I really appreciate your question, Meg, just because sometimes catastrophic thinking is not catastrophic. You know, I mean, when you are in an actual global catastrophe, it is not an exaggeration. So that's very important, right? That not be invalidated. To me, it's also about dosage. How much of the catastrophe are you kind of, you know, taking in and kind of bathing your mind in? So just having some discernment about how much you expose yourself to. Right. Yeah, but it's not catastrophic thinking if it's really happening. Yeah.
So in some way, it's really, this becomes an issue of disciplining our minds, right? Where our attention goes, all your energy is going to go. So to every once in a while, check in to see where your attention is going. And sometimes we may be even watching TV, something fun, something that distracts us. And then on the other hand, we have the phone and we are still checking news. So that would be a good moment to come out of that automatic pilot and to say, okay, let me just check in to see where my attention is going in this moment. And it is really in our control to kind of decide where we need to put our attention. It just takes really practice. And I remember watching at some point a Buddhist monk say, if it takes 100 times in an hour, 100 times you have to do it, you know? So it is work and it takes a lot of intention, but it is part of what is going to help us really come back to present.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, as we talked about, we will bring this webinar to a close with just a guided meditation. And I wanted to just share again how we're very grateful for all of your presence here today. And we will be following up with some resources that different people have shared. We've got some really good ideas here on the call. Yeah, and like I said before, everything we do on the webinar is voluntary. So if you're not currently in a physical space where meditation feels right to you, for example, if you're driving a car or something, you know, no need to do it. But Claudia, is there anything else that you want to say before we go into the brief meditation?
No, I just also wanted to express gratitude for keeping us company today. And I'm hoping that this was helpful and that we can all as a community continue the conversation, the support. Psychosocial support in these situations is kind of the last thing that gets into the news. So I'm hoping that we are starting to be able to bring it in more into the forefront to for everybody to feel supported.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, so what I will offer is just maybe 7 or 8 minutes of guided meditation just to kind of help us all feel a little bit more centered as we go into the rest of our day. And so I would invite you, if you're comfortable and you would like to close your eyes. And just to begin by finding a posture that feels relaxed and alert. Sitting upright, but allowing gravity to help your body settle. Noticing the points of contact between your body and wherever you may be sitting. Noticing any feelings of weight, pressure, contact. Noticing whether your feet are making contact with the ground. And bringing a little bit of attention to your hands. Finding a way for your hands to rest that feels easy and effortless. And perhaps zooming out to get a sense of the whole body sitting. Feeling with your awareness from your head to your feet, just noticing that you are simply sitting here. And as you sit, you may notice that the breath is flowing in and out. Noticing that as the body sits, you are breathing in and breathing out. You might experiment with deepening the breath, maybe intentionally taking a really full in-breath and a long, slow exhalation, letting the exhalation ground you. And a couple more like that, a long, full inhalation. And a long, slow exhalation that connects you with gravity. And if at any point you sense that it is challenging to keep the mind with the body sitting and with the breathing, I sometimes like to experiment with just placing a hand on my heart. Just allowing that physical contact to ground us a little bit more. Bringing a real sense of kindness for ourselves. feeling very aware that many of us, probably all of us on this call this afternoon, are serving as a support to other people during this crisis. And maybe touching into that sense of appreciation for yourself, for taking the time to learn, taking the time to share ideas and share your presence so that you can serve as a stronger and more resilient support for those around you. And as you're ready, maybe opening the eyes and taking in the room around you. Maybe taking a little bit of movement. So thank you so much to everyone for being present, and we look forward to staying in touch. And hopefully our time together is, feels beneficial, and the benefits will ripple out from around all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.